Wonderful program. Okay, now it's being recorded. And we've got a wonderful 1 hour here to spend. I hope you enjoy it. I'm sure you will. And I'd like to now introduce to you the District Governor of 9810, my wife, Alma Reynolds.
Thank you, everyone. Can I ask everyone, please, to put themselves on mute before we begin? Thank you so much. Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining us today for this celebration of multiple Rotary activities. First, today is an acknowledgement of District 9810's Paul Harris Society members. Rotary thanks you for your support and generosity. For those who aren't members, the Paul Harris Society is a group of Rotarians who pledge to donate $1,000 per year to the Rotary Foundation for as long as they are able. At first glance, $1,000 seems like a lot of money, but think of it this way. If one were to make payment for every expense, for every item one buys, or every service one pays for on a credit card, and then pay the bill at the end of every month, how much would that be? $3,000 a month? $5,000 a month? More? If you think that an extra $150 a month would be manageable, then you could become a Paul Harris Society member and join the 7% of Rotarians who give $1,000 per year or more, and be satisfied to know that you will be part of the group contributing 45% of the annual fund giving, and that you are a significant part of the amazing array of projects supported by Rotary clubs, Rotarians, and the Rotary Foundation every year. The second purpose of this event is to open Rotary Foundation Month. This month is a significant part of the Rotary calendar, a time when we acknowledge and celebrate the incredible entity that is our foundation. Consistently adjudged by Charity Navigator as one of the best managed and most ethical charitable foundations in the world, it has a 100% score and 12 consecutive years of 4-star ratings, an entity of which all Rotarians can be proud. The third purpose of today's meeting is to highlight Rotary's commitment to ending polio in the world. This bold undertaking, which was initially ridiculed by the health gurus of the world, is now a major international movement with a huge level of private and governmental support. We are this close, and the revived passion for this cause in 2020 further buoys our hopes that polio will be no more in the near future. The End Polio Now campaign and the Polio Plus project is the activity which fills me with significant personal pride at being a Rotarian, and I hope you feel the same. When we get there, it will be an achievement for the ages and Rotary's greatest gift to humanity. Finally, it is my pleasure today to introduce past Rotary International President Ian Riseley. Rather than list Ian's official titles and roles in Rotary, I thought I would draw on my own view. It is fair to say Ian and I are not close friends, and I don't know him well, but I was thrilled when I heard the news that he had been selected to become Rotary International President. Ian chose as his theme, Rotary Making a Difference, and he called upon Rotarians to ensure our projects really do make a difference by making them sustainable. He strongly urged Rotary and Rotarians to make a difference by speeding up the progress to gender equity in our organisation, and he led Rotary to a far stronger commitment to the environment, leading us to the acceptance of environmental sustainability as the 7th area of focus for our foundation. I see Ian as a real leader, an ambassador for all that Rotary stands for, and a person to admire. Ian's role today is to introduce our keynote speaker, and it is with pleasure that I invite him to do so. Thank you, Ian.
Well, thank you very much, Governor Alma. It's very kind of you to say those words. And I'm delighted to see so many supporters of the Rotary Foundation virtually online this afternoon. As the trustee of the Rotary Foundation, I'd like to start by thanking all of the members of the Paul Harris Society who are with us at this virtual luncheon. Our Rotary Foundation only exists and achieves the good in the world that it does because of contributions from Rotarians. The Paul Harris Society is an excellent way of making a regular donation to the foundation. And as an accountant, did I mention I was an accountant? I think I did. Do I need to mention that it is tax deductible when made via the Rotary Foundation Australian Trust for Australian taxpayers? The Paul Harris Society became an official recognition of the Rotary Foundation in 2013-14. And since then, the contributions have grown every year to the point that they now comprise 18%, when I last looked, of all of the giving to our Rotary Foundation. This is significant, and the Rotary Foundation could not achieve what it does, which is doing good in the world, without your contributions. You are making a difference. So wear this badge signifying membership of the Paul Harris Society with pride. It shows that you regularly and continuously support the magnificent programs of our foundation, which should be the charity of choice for all Rotarians. And for those who may now be considering making that commitment, as Alma just urged you, I urge you to talk to your district Rotary Foundation chair. And it's fair to say that person would be delighted to sign you up. And today, in recognition of Rotary's greatest ever humanitarian program, we have the enormous privilege of having John Nanni with us. Now, I've had the pleasure of getting to know John over recent years, and apart from what we down under would call a good bloke, he's absolutely passionate about Rotary's End Polio Now campaign. As you'll hear shortly, he is a polio survivor. John is immediate past president of the Rotary Club of Middletown-Odessa-Townsend in Delaware, USA. So with a name like that, his club is either indecisive or represents quite a community. Like all of us, even the best of us, John has a personal weakness. Well, he has probably more than one, but I know of one. For example, he actively supports the evil empire in the sport of baseball. And for those who don't recognize that description, it means he follows the New York Yankees. Clearly, that shows that nobody's perfect. And I thought I'd just put this one in here, John. Is that okay? Excellent. Good, good, good. After a successful career in business, John is now a professional singer, and he and his wife, Christine, that's a shocker, John. He and his wife, Christine, sing as a duet known as Rhapsody in Two. So yes, he's an extremely versatile and talented person. He's a benefactor and a major donor to our Rotary Foundation, and of most relevance to today, he's a member of the Paul Harris Society. It's kind of him to join us on Saturday evening, Halloween evening over there. So friends, please give a warm virtual welcome to our guest speaker today, John Nanni. John, in your hands.
Thank you so much, President Ian. It's such an honor to be invited to share the stage with you and past District Governor Bob Aitken. I'm going to share my screen now. I have to tell you, tell everyone the first time I met President Ian was at a Philadelphia Phillies baseball game. It was a special night for Rotary and Polio Plus, and also Strikeout Hunger event. So it was a lot of fun. I was actually impressed with his incredible knowledge of Major League Baseball, and happy that he didn't hold it against me that I was not only a diehard New York Yankee fan, but a season ticket holder. So, and this was at the game. The next night, he actually honored me with one of his Rotary themed bow ties, which I am proudly wearing tonight. He also throws a mean pitch. Ask RI Director Jeffrey Catterat. They had a pitching contest that is still being talked about here in the United States. I'm also impressed with your district's dedication to the Rotary Foundation and your efforts to recruit Paul Harris Society members. I made the dedication of Rotary Direct, and to me, being on a fixed income, it was the easiest way for me to make sure that I reach the Paul Harris Society level every year, and it's been an honor to be part of that. And also, Australia has been a tremendous partner with the polio eradication efforts. And today, I hope to help cement the urgent need to avoid the Rotary polio fatigue that could only hurt our ability to live up to the promise that we made in 1985 to the children of the world, that we will eradicate polio. When I give my talk about the 3 Ps of my life, polio, post-polio syndrome, and polio plus, I have, especially to an audience like this, I often feel that I'm preaching to the choir. But I often find that most Rotarians that are so dedicated to Polio Plus, they often don't hear about the why we need to eradicate polio. I will also talk about the current coronavirus pandemic, what it has in common with pre-Salk vaccine days. But at first, I want to point out at the very beginning that although I'll be talking about some negative issues in my personal life with polio, I do so representing about 2 million polio survivors in North America and more than 20 million polio survivors worldwide, and that life is good, and no matter what the future holds for me physically, I truly am one of the lucky ones. It's amazing the number of similarities between these two pandemics. Polio was one of the most feared infectious diseases in the 20th century. I would take a wild guess or bet that coronavirus is going to go down as one of the most feared infectious diseases in the 21st century, at least up until now it is. Polio is a virus that attacks the nerves that control muscles. COVID-19 is a virus that mainly attacks the respiratory system. But so much is unknown about the coronavirus and also the after effects of what coronavirus will leave. However, scientists actually knew less about polio back in the 50s than today's scientists know about the coronavirus. Like COVID-19, they didn't know why some that caught polio had mild symptoms and others so severe that they died or had extreme outcomes. In the case of polio, paralyzed limbs and breathing issues. Like COVID-19, people were contagious before they had symptoms, thus unknowingly infecting others. In fact, they now know that for every diagnosed case of paralytic polio, there were as many as 200 people walking around with little or no symptoms at all with polio, and thus being very, very contagious, and one of the many reasons why polio is so hard to eradicate. Many of those people who did not know they had post-polio syndrome or had polio now have post-polio syndrome, and have no idea what is causing their pain and their issues. Another similarity between COVID and polio is that they both targeted specific yet different age groups. COVID-19 especially lethal for the elderly, polio for the young. Polio is what's called an enterovirus, which means that the virus enters the body through the mouth. And as we all know, young children put things in their mouth more so than adults. One of the reasons why young children get polio before, more so than adults. So we fast forward to the summer of 1953, where hospital polio wards with the dreaded iron lungs like these help many polio victims breathe. And what's ironic is yesterday's iron lungs are today's ventilators. What I just learned just last week, remote learning is not new to the COVID pandemic. Back in 1937, Chicago schools were closed for 3 weeks because of a polio epidemic, and some 315,000 children in grades 3 through 8 continued their education at home, receiving lessons on the radio. Like today's pandemic in the 50s, before the Salk vaccine, people were frightened. It was a very scary time because catching polio was as easy as catching a cold. Here we have a bank of iron lungs, polio victims stacked on top of one another. Here's a baby only a few months old in an iron lung. If one of the members of the family came down with polio, many times not only was the whole family quarantined, often the whole street was quarantined. And my mom would tell me how many months after I had came down with polio and I was clear of being contagious or anything like that, she would be walking me down the street in a stroller and people would literally cross the street to avoid us. And back then a strange thing was happening, or should I say not happening. Summer rituals, public swimming pools were closed, Little League fields in many towns were empty. And just like today, mothers didn't have their kids with them while grocery shopping. I often hear from polio survivors stories on how they felt abandoned when they were in the hospital polio wards, because like today's coronavirus patients, they weren't allowed to have visitors. They would go weeks without seeing their parents. And when they did, it was often from a far distance, usually behind glass windows. I was paralyzed from my neck down at 10 months old, only 6 months before the Salk vaccine was widely tested. My great aunt was a nun who, spent most of her career as a nun working in hospitals and could read a hospital chart. She saw that I wasn't getting the care I needed, and she knew of Sister Kinney, an incredible, famous nurse from Australia who developed a physical therapy program that helped polio victims, while they were paralyzed so their muscles didn't atrophy. Without my mom taking me out of the hospital and doing Sister Kinney's physical therapy on me, I would never have walked. I actually walked a year later, and my brother takes credit for teaching me how to walk. He would take example from my parents and lean me up against the refrigerator and encourage me to walk. But unlike my parents, when I started to fall, he didn't catch me. So eventually, out of self-defense, I put my foot out to stop myself from falling, thus my first steps. And to this day, he takes credit for teaching me how to walk. And as years went by, I got to the point where most people would never guess I had polio. I had a fairly normal childhood, and I actually played baseball, basketball, and football in high school. However, my coaches didn't know I had polio. And my parents didn't know that it would affect my ability to play sports. My coaches, I was very slow and very clumsy. And my coaches always yelled at me and they often called me lazy. It was a very frustrating time in my life. However, that was polio for a lot of people. Again, I was one of the lucky ones. Many young adults and children died or grew up paralyzed or had an arm or leg that was significantly smaller because their muscles atrophied. I have many friends that got polio when they were older. I was blessed because I don't remember having polio. My mom would tell me how I would scream in pain when she stretched my muscles while I was paralyzed. For those who were older when they got polio, they remember all too well the pain and suffering and how many of them suffered from multiple painful corrective surgeries. One friend of mine even had their good leg shortened 5 inches to match their polio leg so they could walk without a significant limp. When I turned 40, I started to have renewed muscle weakness, joint pain, and extreme fatigue. Eventually, after seeing 10 doctors in 2 years, most of those doctors never having seen a polio survivor, I was finally diagnosed with post-polio syndrome. Many never get that diagnosis and suffer without knowing why. 15 years later, I'm confined to a wheelchair for most of my mobility. For every child we save from polio, if they survive the initial polio virus attack, we truly are saving them from a life of pain and suffering. These symptoms of post-polio syndrome often occur to polio survivors about 30 to 40 years after the original polio virus attack, in as many as 70% of those paralyzed by polio. Basically, the muscles that took over for the damaged muscles on a polio survivor, they start dying off early from overuse. The more a polio survivor overuses their muscles, the faster their muscles die off. For somebody like me who had almost every muscle from my neck down affected by polio, just the hard work of trying to get to normal over the years took a negative toll on my muscles. The neurologist said if I didn't want to lose the total use of my legs again, I had to make dramatic changes. The old adage of use it or lose it had to be replaced with conserve to preserve. But like most polio survivors, being an A-type personality, it was very hard for me to slow down. So to avoid overuse, I now restrict my steps to a couple hundred steps a day. Many days each step is very painful. However, I've learned that there's very little I can't do. I just have to find a different way of doing it. And I'm lucky I live in a world where there are organizations like Rotary International, with Rotarians like yourself who care about the welfare of others and who put service above self. So count your blessings, because I assume that a large number of you received your childhood vaccinations when you were younger, protecting you from childhood diseases. There are some people who can't be vaccinated, and others because of illness such as cancer who are going through chemotherapy. They have a compromised immune system. That's why it's important to have the majority of people around those people vaccinated, thus creating what's called the herd immunity. Now that's a term, at least here in the United States, that's recently been politicized. But the true meaning of herd immunity is based on science and is based on immunizations. This past year, here in the United States, because we have lower vaccination rates in some areas than India, Pakistan, Afghanistan, and Nigeria, there were over 1,300 cases of measles in the United States. Measles was declared eradicated in the year 2000 here in the United States. Over 100,000 kids die every year in the world from measles. To control measles, you need 93% of the population to be vaccinated to create this needed herd immunity. For polio, you need at least 85% of the population for herd immunity. And according to Bill Gates, for every dollar we spend on childhood immunizations, you get $44 in economic benefit. That's the cost savings of not having to treat that person when they're ill, the cost savings of not having to treat that person their whole life because they were ill, and the productivity that that person will have their whole life because they weren't ill. Not bad investment for $1 to get $44 in economic benefit. Okay. According to the World Health Organizations, vaccines currently prevent up to 3 million deaths per year. Unfortunately, 1,500 kids die every day in the world from vaccine preventable diseases. And as you know, Rotary in 1985 started Polio Plus from 125 endemic countries with almost 1,000 cases of paralytic polio a day, down to 129 cases of wild polio in the world so far, 77 in Pakistan, 52 in Afghanistan. The World Health Organization estimates that 80 million babies have not gotten their life-saving vaccines because of the COVID pandemic, which is one of the reasons why we've had such a big uptake of polio, wild polio cases in the world, in Afghanistan and Pakistan. The good news is that last month we started back up the door-to-door house vaccinations. And great news is August 25th, a great day for all Rotarians and all of Africa. Nigeria, being polio-free for 4 days, was declared wild polio-free for all of Africa. Nigeria overcame tremendous obstacles to accomplish this feat, once again proving wild polio can be defeated. We vaccinate more than 450 million children every year in developing countries. But until polio is eradicated, it is a world threat. And because there's no cure for polio, vaccination is the only protection. And to me, this is the most powerful slide I have in my presentation. This is pre-COVID days, a 24-hour period of all flights in the world. Each line is one plane ride. You can hardly see North America and Europe on this map. To me, this proves how COVID-19 spread so easily throughout the world, and also is the reason why we truly are a plane ride away from polio coming back to your country and to my country, especially if we don't keep up the vaccination rates. Unfortunately, vaccines have become a victim of their own success. People don't remember the polio epidemics. Hopefully, they understand the enormous problems with COVID and change their attitude towards vaccines. Because this is a typical Sunday event throughout the country, throughout the United States after the Salk vaccine was widely available in 1956. I only wish attitudes towards vaccines had the same enthusiasm today as they did back then. I pray that eradication of polio happens soon so that all kids around the world will avoid what happened to many like myself when a vaccine was not available. So I'm often asked, what's the plus in Polio Plus? Over the past several months, the Polio Plus infrastructure Rotary helped build, including its tools, workforce, and extensive surveillance networks, has been used to help prevent the spread of COVID-19, help find where COVID-19 is and has been through contact tracing, and help educate people in their countries on how to prevent COVID-19, especially in Nigeria, Pakistan, Afghanistan. To me, this truly represents the plus in Polio Plus, just as it did in the past to respond to outbreaks of Ebola, yellow fever, and the avian flu. And a prime example of that is the role Polio Plus played in stopping the Ebola outbreak twice in the past 4 years in Africa, especially in Nigeria, literally stopping the Ebola pandemic from becoming a world pandemic. Really was an incredible use of Rotary's Polio Plus program. So here we have a polio survivor in Nigeria who used to have to travel miles to get contaminated water for his herd and family. Polio Plus drilled boreholes in his village, and he now gets clean water for his herd and family without traveling miles, thus becoming so much more productive. A few months before the pandemic in India, NID workers and volunteers vaccinated more than 32 million children in one weekend. This past weekend, last weekend, in Pakistan, they vaccinated more than 38 million children just in one weekend. It's really incredible. These immense NID vaccine campaigns are also changing societies in many Muslim countries by employing women to go to house vaccinating children. In the Muslim religion, a man cannot enter a home without the man of the house. If the man of the house is not there, a woman can. Therefore, by employing women to do the vaccinations, less children are skipped and the number of women in the workforce are increasing, thus changing societal views in those countries on women working outside of the home. During NIDs in areas that have malaria, mosquito nets are given out by Polio Plus workers. This polio survivor in Nigeria had no way of financially supporting himself until Polio Plus taught him how to make hand-driven bikes that allow polio survivors to get around without dragging themselves on the ground. Polio Plus helped him start a business making these tricycles. Here's one of his employees, also a polio survivor, that now has a job and is a productive member of society, mostly because of Rotary's Polio Plus. So while confronting today's new challenges, it's important that Rotary members continue the fight to end polio, to sustain our commitment to the children of the world that we made in '85, and to reach our fundraising goal of $50 million. I'm happy to say that we were able to reach that goal towards the end of last June, and qualifying us for the full Gates Foundation matching monies, making our $50 million become $150 million. Continued contributions to Polio Plus will ensure that we come out of this crisis strong and tackle the remaining barriers to a polio-free world. So did you know that a Snickers bar costs more than the polio vaccine? How many Snicker bars can you buy to help eradicate polio? And there are many ways thinking outside of the box to raise money for polio. My district 7630, all of Delaware and Eastern Shore, Maryland, is doing a PIN fundraiser. And we've got our district foundation to match all PIN sales with district designated funds dedicated to Polio Plus, which triggers a dollar for dollar matching by Rotary's World Fund. And that total is then tripled by the Gates Foundation. We're selling them for $40 a pin. A $40 purchase becomes $360, and 600 kids get vaccinated. Our district governor last year, Bill Ferguson, during his official club visits, raised $14,000 selling pins, which with all the matching monies became $126,000. I have a number of districts and clubs throughout the world buying pins from me. I put my email address in the chat box if your club and or district is interested. I'm selling them at cost and plus freight. And I'm happy to say that last week I sent 600 pins to a district in Alaska and 20 pins to a club in Germany. As USA coordinator of World's Greatest Meal, I would be remiss not to mention this incredible fundraising program started by Australian polio survivor and Rotarian Suzanne Ray and her friend Mukesh Malhotra. I'm not sure if you know the story behind it, but they met up in England and they had lunch and they fought over the bill and Suzanne lost. And so what she said what she was going to pay for lunch, she'd donate to Polio Plus. Thus the first World's Greatest Meal to help end polio. And through an incredible social media campaign and word, mouth to mouth through Rotary, an incredible effort by Suzanne and many other people. So far, after 5 years, they've been able to raise enough money to vaccinate more than 18.5 million children. So just go to wgmeal.com to find out, if you're not familiar, how to do it. And please remember to buy a lot of Snicker bars by donating to Polio Plus. I want to end on some exciting news. The polio vaccine, as I said, is really the only weapon to fight polio. Here's past Rotary International Vice President Ann Matthews on the right, a few years ago helping vaccinate a child in India. The exciting news is that this weapon, the oral polio vaccine, is getting an incredible upgrade that will truly be one of the nails needed to finally put in the coffin of this dreaded disease called polio. Polio Plus and its wonderful world partners have been developing a new oral polio vaccine. As you may know, occasionally the current oral polio vaccine will mutate and actually cause some cases of what's called circulating vaccine-derived polio. It's only one case in 2 million kids vaccinated, but because so many kids have been skipped over the past 7 months because of the COVID-19 pandemic, a lot of those areas have very low vaccination rates, and that's what fuels the vaccine-derived polio cases. So far, there's been over 440 cases of circulating vaccine-derived polio in 15 countries. However, this new oral polio vaccine has been designed not to mutate. It has just finished its exhaustive human testing, is currently being manufactured, and should be in those 15 countries this coming month, so that we can finally put the nail in the coffin of polio. As I've said before, I am one of the lucky ones. If I was born in a developing country back in the 50s, I wouldn't be here today. I've shared my personal story with you, certainly not for your sympathy. Through the love of my family and friends, and fortunate to find knowledgeable doctors, I've been able to be a father, husband, son, friend, now a proud grandfather, and a proud Rotarian. Please continue to fight to eradicate polio, because going back is not an option. World Polio Day was last Saturday, but for the kids in the world that we haven't vaccinated yet, World Polio Day should be every day. Rotary was there at the beginning, and we must be there at the end to see this fight through and eradicate polio. Thank you so much for listening to my story, for inviting me here, and I'd be happy to answer any questions if we have time. If not, I've put my email address in the chat box and be happy to answer any questions. Thank you so much. And thank you so much for your incredible dedication to the Paul Harris Society and also the Rotary Foundation and Polio Plus. Thank you.
Thank you, John. Fabulous, wonderful, and so instructive for a lot of people here, and in fact, everybody. And in the 4 months that I've been the polio ambassador and the Paul Harris Society chair of this district, my knowledge has gone from about 1% to 10%. And it's occasions like this when I realised just how much what our organisation has done and how much people have made a difference in the world. John, while everybody's thinking about a question, Jody is there as well, looking after one of the screens. Please, if you put your hand up for a question, but I'm going to start off with the questions first. Can I ask you, John, about post-polio syndrome? Do you have an organisation that that you're a member of, or has Rotary in the United States organised a post-polio syndrome group that you meet with? Is there anything like that you have?
Well, actually, all Rotarians, in fact, you don't have to be a polio survivor. There is a Rotary Action Group called Polio Survivors Rotary Action Group. It's headed by polio survivor and past district governor Ann Lee Hussey, who is also on the international committee for Polio Plus, a true polio warrior. So yes, there is that. Also, there are throughout the world, including a couple of great, support groups in Australia that polio survivors can go to via the internet. I'm on the board of the Polio Survivors Network of New Jersey and Delaware, and prior to the COVID situation, the group in Delaware would meet every quarter, meet together, talk about what's going on, talk about how to help each other. And what's interesting is one of their major goals is to help stop polio and help other polio survivors in the world, because unfortunately many don't get that, like I said, don't get the diagnosis of polio, post-polio syndrome, or don't have access to doctors who know about it. Many times when I'm going for medical help, especially physical therapy, I have weakened muscles. So the logical thing is to let's build those muscles. And that's the worst thing, because basically those muscles have been overused all these years and working them out to build the muscle. I have to avoid resistance type of exercises. So a perfect example of that is President Franklin Delano Roosevelt. his first term as president, he was walking around with crutches, okay, and getting around. Down in Warm Springs, Georgia, where they had a facility there that he made famous, they didn't know about post-polio syndrome back then. And they put him through such an extensive physical therapy program, building up his muscles, that they destroyed his muscles. And in his last term, just before he passed away, he couldn't walk anymore. He had to be carried and pre-positioned. So, you know, there's a lot of issues and a lot of things. I have to train these doctors on how to do it. And many of us polio survivors have to really be aggressive in convincing doctors and physical therapists on what needs to be done and educate them on it. But there's some great internet sites. The Pennsylvania Survivors Group is probably the best one. Just go Google PA polio survivors, and they have the best information about post-polio syndrome. So that's a great question.
John, Ian, would you like to ask John your question?
Thanks, Greg. In fact, John has really covered my question, but let me emphasize that it seems to me financially, what a great deal it is with the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation that we spend 50 and they give us another 100 million to spend eliminating polio. It's hard to go past that as a return on investment, John.
Oh, absolutely. I don't know where I can make an investment to a nonprofit where my money not only will triple, but I know for a fact that that money will get to the programs. If you go on Charity Navigator and look up, you know, what you feel are the best charities in the world, and find that, you know, only 50% or 60% of the money actually gets to the, you know, to the area that is supposed to help people. The rest is done is spent on advertising to get people to, you know, to donate, on administrative costs, large salaries for the board and things like that. Nowhere. I have yet to have anyone tell me where you can make a better investment of your money to a nonprofit than Rotary Foundation. And then, you know, if you can convince your district foundation chairs and committee to match polio money with district designated funds, that will allow us to get a 9-time factor on your investment. You know, I mean, it's really phenomenal, and really is one of the major ways we were able to reach the $50 million. A couple of weeks before the end of June, we were a number of $1 million shy of the $50 million, but districts came through with district designated funds for polio and allowed us to get to the $50 million. And that truly is the key to convince districts. There's many districts in the world that are sitting on huge numbers of funds in their district designated funds. And one of the other stats that I just heard is that less than 10% of all Rotarians in the world give to Polio Plus, and only 53% of all Rotary clubs give to Polio Plus. We need to educate Rotarians, and not so much about the Polio Plus program, but the reasons why we need to end polio. What we're stopping, you know, the whole life of severe problems a polio survivor will have, and what we're stopping. You know, we've stopped 19 million kids from getting polio. We need to make sure that we stop the next 19 million.
Can I draw your attention to the chat line? John has put his email address there. If you've got any questions that you would like to ask him after this, please take a note of that while you can. There's also Russell Marnock and Carol Lawton have made comment about the badges, and I'm sure John Barnes and David Alexander have had a look at that. That's noticed. We've got a couple of minutes more for a couple more questions. Is there somebody else that would like to say? Well, Graham Woolacott would love to ask a question, please.
Unmute yourself. There you go.
Thanks, Greg. Not a question, I said to John, because he probably can't answer it. It's just more a comment. Ian brought up the fact of leverage and multiplying on the dollar. Well, the additional one that we have as individuals within Australia, as Ian had said in his address, we get a tax break. It's tax deductible from an individual.
So, and that's a very important point for all of us to think about as we go. Any more? Just one more question before I ask Bob Aitken.
We do have a question regarding the pins. I have them in stock. I would be happy to ship them to you. Or if you have somebody that I can email the graphics, and you want to get them made there, as long as we get them out there in the field and we get $40. An interesting fact, if every Rotarian in the world gave $40 a year to Polio Plus, we would easily reach the $50 million goal. So, however you want to do it, Rotarians love pins. It's an easy sale. It's, I have 2,500 pins out in the field right now. If all 2,500 pins sell, that'll be $720,000 for Polio Plus. So go for it.
Okay. One more question. Anybody else got a question, please? No. Okay. Well, John, the thanks are going to be said in just a few moments, because I'm asking now to ask Bob Aitken to give the vote of thanks and also address us as well. Bob is past district governor and a member of the Rotary Club of Lower Blue Mountains, and past district governor of District 9685. But most of us know him as a 30-year the managing editor or executive director of Rotary Down Under. He's a journalist, and he's held many leadership roles on district PR and polio committees. I've only just started to get to know Bob, and I'm really enjoying the time that we've spent together virtually and on email. And the unique thing about this is what I love about this. Bob is one of the original Polio Plus pioneers involved in the launch at the National International Assembly in 1985. And he continues his role as chairman of District 9685 Polio Committee and the Rotary International End of Polio Now coordinator for Zone 8. Bob Aitken, thank you. Muting Bob, mute. I'm muted as well now. Bob's right now. Go for it.
Okay, thank you. Thanks for that kind intro, Greg. And it's been a great delight to sit here and listen to John. That's a very inspirational tale, John. And as Greg said, I was part of the original launch in Nashville in '85 and took part in the first press conference with Dr. Sabin, which was also quite inspirational. And things have moved on from there, of course. And I was pleased to hear your story of the post-polio syndrome. And I can share with you that Australia is very well placed in this area. Polio Australia is very active, a great team of volunteers. Some 3 or 4 years ago, the governor then of my district, 9685, Gina Growden, and I organised a series of 10 post-polio syndrome clinics around the northwestern half of Sydney. And we produced from that, that was aimed at clinicians, doctors, physios, nursing staff, to do exactly what you have described in the right way to treat people in these advanced stages of the post syndrome. There's even textbooks available now through Polio Australia. So we're very, very conscious of that great need as we move on. I have to say that I'm enthused this year more so than ever, because I sense a real rebirth of enthusiasm. And I can say up front that it must be due to the current crop of leadership of governors who have done outstanding work in so many areas. I've never seen World Polio Day so enthusiastically approached, so many different way out schemes. We had things like an outback bush ute relay from Alice Springs to Adelaide, where they carried signs and met the public and collected funds and just spread the word. We had a chap in Richmond or Windsor, north of Sydney, and his wife cook for 2 days, chicken meals, and sold them and raised $3.5 grand for polio. Simple things, big things, small things. So I'm very confident that you mentioned the polio apathy of a few years ago, and I believe that it's now turned the corner and gone. I think that we're all enthusiastically going forward. And why should we? Because the future is very important, as you've hinted, I suppose, along the way. When this scourge is gone, it will save the world, the governments of the world, more than $1 billion a year. And that's funds that can be then pumped back into other vital health needs and educational initiatives. So there's a lot to be said for the continuing drive, and I know it becomes painful at times to fundraise. I think that the whole world is realising that we have to continue to fund. The lead from the Gates Foundation and from Rotary and others has been important, but other people around the world are now understanding that we're all in this. You recall the meeting in the UAE, late 2019, where they pledged, governments of that area pledged $2.6 billion to the cause. Now that's unheard of in recent years. And the good news is it's not pie in the sky. Those governments have already delivered 80% of that in cash to the campaign. So these are amazing stats. Since our inception, of course, Rotary has invested something like $2.2 billion US. And similarly, the Gates Foundation, $2.8 billion. So we're in this right to the end. I've been saying for the last few months that if we can only solve the war along the border in Pakistan and Afghanistan, this whole thing can be behind us in 3 to 4 years. So thank you for what you're doing, John. It's been a treat to hear your personal story. I have to say that Ian and I are becoming veterans of many campaigns with these virtual meetings. And whilst you spoke of Ian's baseball prowess, John, I have to share with you that he's also quite a legendary member of the Australian Rotary Cricket Fellowship. I remember seeing Ian bowl these very high leg spinners with an action that could be best described as poetry in motion some years ago. So you should try and make time to see him play social cricket one day. He's also a Melbourne Storm rugby league supporter, so he has many claims to sporting fame. And look, before going, I should acknowledge my dear friends, Graham, of course, who were part of the team in 96-7, which often referred to as the greatest group of governors ever. So Graham and Lil, very good to see you both here. Thank you for having me on board. Thank you for what you've done. Thank you, Governor Alma. This is a splendid initiative. We've taken part in about half a dozen now in recent weeks. So the flag's up and flying. And I know that the year ahead will be a very, very positive one, thanks to people like you, John.
Thank you, Bob. Wonderful. Thank you very much. And thank you very much. Past Rotary International President Ian, thank you very much for coming online with us today and doing the introduction. John Nanni, we're just delighted to have had this time with you today, and we thank you very much for staying up late, probably not quite past your bedtime yet, And thank you very much for joining us. And once again, I thank Bob. To the district governors present, the members of the other districts that are also here, I want to thank you all for being here with us. This recording will become available, and we will be posting it on our website or on our YouTube channel. That I believe that our technical team, and I'm just looking at Jody now, and he's put his thumbs up and everything else like that. Please have a look at, take any information you need off the chat area, because we'll leave this up for a couple of minutes now. But I want to thank everybody for attending. And as we talked about, we're 5 minutes early, so that'll give you an opportunity to go for your Sunday roast. Thank you very much for attending. And if you want to know any more about the Paul Harris Society, please get in touch with me directly. Once again, Ian, John, and Bob, thank you, and good afternoon, everybody.
Thank you for inviting me.
Thank you all. Bye-bye. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, John. Appreciate that. Nanni, you gave me a whole new definition of Schadenfreude. I didn't really understand it until the Yankees got beaten in the playoffs. So suddenly I felt good.
Wait until next year, right?
Yeah.
There's always next year, John.
That can only come from a Red Sox, eh?
Yeah, well, it's true.
Yeah, look
I don't know about only, but something.
No. And you can tolerate the difficulties with all the others, but it's only when it comes from a Bobby Soxer that's when you really it's really when you get concerned.
113 days until opening day.
Not that anyone's
I have
counting.
the power to cut this off with one imagine.
Great to see everybody.
Thank you.
Yes.
Have a blessed night.
Thanks again, John. Cheers.
Bye, everyone. Thanks, John.